All right, all right. Well, welcome back to our listeners. And today we are talking about longevity, one of our favorite topics. The question being, is there really a limit to how long we can live? Or will we just be able to keep going?
Yeah. I like those, was it the biohackers, I think is what they call them. Folks, there's a lot of them who have podcasts, but they are trying all sorts of things, right? They're taking this medicine or doing this exercise routine with the hopes of making their bodies better, their lives longer.
Right.
I think it's hard for a lot of that stuff because it seems so anecdotal to me. Like, someone does a thing and they say, what's the recent one? Cold plunging. I've been cold plunging. I haven't, but people will say, I've been cold plunging, and now they feel I'm going to live forever. I feel so much more invigorated, and I'm not sure. Like the science.
Well, maybe what they're really referring to is cryogenics, right?
Yeah.
Where they freeze you at death, and they'll bring you back to life at some future date.
Is this just the preparation?
That's the ultimate cold plunge, I think.
I know. But the reality is there's been a trend that people are living longer, and we've got some statistics that we'll share about that. But what we're seeing as a result is industries are cropping up that surround this longevity. So for those of us that are like, yeah, I don't want to just live longer. I want to be the healthiest version of myself at 80 years old. And so there's this industry kind of born out of performance athletes and scientific research and nutrition. And, it's like they're all combining, and we're seeing the rise of these, red light therapy treatments, IV supplements, I'm sure our listeners could rattle off 10 different ones. What other ones can you guys think of?
Well, walk into a health food store and you see the supplement side. Please tell me, how do you distinguish which one is going to help you and which one is not?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, there's no direction. There's no support. There's no understanding of, you go down an aisle and you're going, okay, they say, and of course they advertise all of the benefits of that particular supplement. And I've talked to doctors over the years and I say, do you take supplements? And most doctors don't. They'll take maybe one a day kind of thing, but they really don't unless they have a medical need where they take a prescription or whatever. Yeah. But it's really interesting because on one side of it, what we're talking about is people believe in this alternative health. And so they become their own physician, or they become their own knowledge base. Mm-hmm. And then you got on the other side where you have the medical practices who comes through years and years of training. And they're saying, no, this is not, you should do it this way. So it's just interesting how this is all, it's become really an interesting topic.
Yeah. And people are all different, right? There's some things that are successful for others and not for some. Right. I always like the comment of what's the best workout? Is it CrossFit? Is it weight training? Is it aerobic exercise? Is it running? Is it swimming? And the answer, I think, what a lot of people would say is it's the one that you do. Like it's the exercise that you actually get up and do, even if it's just a walk, a good old.
You mean it doesn't help if I just write it down somewhere?
No, that's right.
Okay, all right.
That's right. That you do, and so I think this whole realm of which things are useful for people. Like, yeah, if you got on took good vitamins and drank good water and got good sleep and did some exercise, will that help you live longer and in a more healthy way? The answer is probably yes.
Right.
Is there these magic bullet things? And I like the distinction. One of the articles we were looking at made a distinction between like the medical and then just the lifestyle or even the aesthetic, right? There's a lot of things that people will do, especially in the plastic surgery world, where it's not related to living longer. It's just looking a certain way. And there's other things that have nothing to do with a medical condition, curing a disease. It's more so, I just want a lifestyle. I want to be active. I want to be able to walk up the stairs. And there's kind of different pieces of those, right? There's aesthetic, there's lifestyle, and there's also just the pure medical.
Right, because what we're talking about here is not just that individuals want to live as long as possible, but they are now expecting a certain quality of life later in life than I guess what's been expected before. Jeremiah, you pulled some statistics. What was the life expectancy in around?
Yeah, these are great. So in the 1950. And this is just a blended life expectancy, so men and women together, just as a U.S. citizen. In 1950, the life expectancy was 68 years old, and that's when you expect to die. And even now, like even just saying that, I think of how many clients I have that are 68 years old. Like that is not an old age in current times. So in 1950, it was 68. By 2007, it had moved to 78. So a decade longer of expected life. And this is for everybody. This is just not those who are already healthy or a certain socioeconomic class. This is just as a population. There's a decade increase of life expectancy.
Now, in full disclosure, one of the biggest factors for the increased longevity is infant mortality.
Mm-hmm.
Infant mortality drops significantly from 1900 down to 1950.
You know what I was going to guess was the impact of World War.
Well,
So in
that
1950,
that has a part of it, but the
or just at
biggest,
the end of World War II.
if you dig in the stats and if you put in what happened as far as infant mortality, well, we don't see and we don't hear about infant mortality, but you can imagine growing up in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was a very common thing.
Well, and even mother mortality, I'm sure, with that, like of childbirth of both the mother and the child, of the death expectancy. Well, and with that, I think between 1950, we'll just say in 2007, that decade increase, a lot of it, just so you said, is probably the statistic. There's also, I think, that the medical advances that were made in that time, not just say, hey, we're healthier than we used to be, but cancers or tumors or all sorts of diabetes, all these things that at one point were fatal. Like these would meaningfully cut short your life. And now there's treatments, there's some cures, but also a number of treatments that have been able to push that out. And so the interesting part of this was 1950, it was 68, 2007, it was 78. And then currently, to 2024, where we're at today, this source was saying 80 is the life expectancy. I've read a number that will say 84 different times. And then it was projecting by 2090, it would be 88 would be the life expectancy, 2 decades more than what it was in the 50s. Now, the question that we were talking about earlier, and I think is really interesting, is will we keep up that same pace? And Laura, to your question, like, is there a limit to how long we can go? Like, if we can take out some of those negatives, car accidents and cancers and things like that, and where it's just the body's normal aging, and then as people lean into these therapies and all sorts of things, will that life expectancy push, and how far can it push? Like, will 100 be normal? It's not currently. I don't know that it ever will be, but it's interesting to consider.
Well, and I don't know about you both, and I don't know about our listeners, but honestly, I don't want to be 100 years old if I'm not enjoying life. If I'm not.
Well, if you're not, if you can't, get up every day and have expectation of good things.
Right.
You don't want to be isolated. One of the biggest things I found, again, I've been in this business for a long time, and this has been a common subject matter, is that multiple generations are alive at the same time. And I think that most people, I think the hard part for older people is losing all their friends and family. Mm-hmm. They feel isolated and alone because of their age.
Yeah.
One of the biggest studies that I've read that I think makes the most sense to me is you need to be engaged. So whether it be with family, but with church, other social organizations, but you got to be engaged with people. And we have a tendency to isolate people older because they lose their ability, like driving, mobility, some of the other things that just naturally happen. But also it isolates them, and it becomes a real COVID, I think, was a very it illustrated how important it was to have social interaction, because some patients, nursing homes and such as that, they could not meet with their family. They couldn't meet with their friends.
And what impact that had.
And the death rate rose through that period of time.
That might also have an impact on our current life expectancy statistics as the impact of COVID. But there's a great Netflix documentary on centennials, and they review different hot spots, so to speak, of centennials around the world and try to draw some commonalities in terms of lifestyle. Some of it had to do with mobility. Some of it had to do with waking up with a sense of purpose and community in each one of those years that you spend. And also, I know, Dad, you've had these conversations over the years with our clients, and those conversations that I've joined in more recently have brought up the topic of how our social benefit, government provided benefit, is going to be impacted as the baby boomers continue to age. And you shared a statistic during a recent meeting where you said the current working population, 85 cents of the benefit, Social Security benefit being paid out to someone in retirement, is based off of what our current deduction
right. So
is.
The number of people that are continuing to pay into for Social Security benefit, the amount of people working is shrinking. So it's gone from, you go back to the 1930s when Social Security started, we have somewhere close to 8 or 9 people working for every person that's retired. So everybody paying in. But what happens is that's shrunk now, and it's actually getting less than 3, and it becomes more burdensome. And then you add on to that, people are living longer. So the dollars that the government actually collects from current people paying into Social Security is about, I think it's about 76 cents. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it's around that 80 cents. It's slightly less than 80 cents. So the deficit that our government has right now with borrowing as much money as they are is to pay the Social Security Medicare benefits. And the reason for that is we don't have enough workers that are paying into the system.
Right.
Well, it's just math. It's just math.
Naturally, there's going to talk about just math. I think naturally there's going to have to be an adjustment. And so if people continue to live longer, the expectation is going to be that you're going to work for more years, and we might see potentially Social Security have a delayed benefit. I think, Dad, you referenced that this has already happened on occasion. Social Security benefit used to be you were eligible at an earlier age, and it's gradually gotten later.
Yeah, so that thing that you get from the government on Social Security benefits, what you're looking for is your full retirement age. And that has moved. That's been a moving target. And they're talking about moving that up even further. It's not that you can't get your benefit, but if you start earlier, you're going to get a reduced benefit. Mm-hmm. And so if you wait until you're 70, that's when you're going to probably get your best benefit. Yep. Yeah. So these moves are not they're not draconian, but they have to be dealt with. And what bothers me with the current political system right now, neither presidential candidate is talking about reducing the debt. How do we deal with this? And a lot of this is the entitlement programs that we're paying out on right now. And and I can remember going to Wharton and going to a special executive program, and one of the professors that spoke to us was talking about the programs, talking about primarily Social Security and Medicare, and she actually was talking to George Bush and at the presidential level about what they were going to do is make adjustments. And her recommendations were very minor. They were not throwing grandma over the cliff, so to speak.
Right, earth-shattering, yeah.
But what happened was 9/11. 9/11 occurred, and all of a sudden everything blew out because we went to war. And so we couldn't worry about social programs. And so we were that close to making an adjustment because during Bill Clinton's administration, he actually was reducing the debt. He was paying it down. For the first time historically, we were reducing our debt, and it was giving a country an opportunity, and then 9/11 occurred. And so these events have changed the outcome. So we are where we are right now, but we need to address this before it gets completely out of hand right now.
Let's talk about some other changes when we talk about healthcare delivery in the later stages of life. Let's talk about the changes in long-term care insurance. This is something that comes up often.
Oh, don't get me started.
Jeremiah, do you want to get us started?
Sure, yeah. Changes there? Yeah, but I didn't jump too long because I think we'll jump to more. But I think years ago there was insurance agencies that would allow long-term care. You could go out and get a policy, and they would say, "Hey, you're going to live for this long. We think it's going to cost this much. We think so. We'll write you a policy." Well, those actuarials who figured that out, they were wrong. It costs more than they thought it might, and the people lived longer. And so, because of that, a lot of those insurance agencies stopped offering long-term care in the same way. And often with clients now that come in, 2024, we look at long-term care insurance, and often either it's too expensive for what they're going to get for it, or so they can't afford it, or the ones who can afford it, they don't need it because they have enough money to pay for all the eventualities. So there's very few folks that we find that can afford long-term care insurance and need that benefit. It's become a real narrow band.
Yeah, so the advantages of what we do with clients is we stress their plan. We look at their plan, we take statistics, and we say, what is a reasonable age that you would receive long-term care? You need additional money coming across to help pay for your support for assisted living and or in-home care or whatever it is. Because remember, your health insurance pays for your doctors and your hospital stays, but gives you very limited coverage for in-home care for your body, where you have a long-term chronic illness that you're not going to be in the hospital for that. So again, a lot of people have a misunderstanding, but going back to the insurance industry has a black eye on this because they sold these policies based upon you pay this premium, you get this benefit, you also have this inflationary factor, so your benefit will rise. They were all wrong. And so now you have people that are having increasing, and their health is deteriorating. So they're very concerned about letting their policy go. And so what's happening is you have less and less people paying in, okay, math, right? But you have more and more people that are using the benefit. So the people that remain are using the benefit. Hence the losses are dramatic. And the increase in premiums are absolutely absurd.
Right.
We're talking 150%. And everybody is a culprit. AARP, they were one of the biggest promoters and got paid to make sure that the members of the AARP bought life insurance policies, and they bought them from a company called Genworth. It was part of GE. It's been spun off now, but it's an atrocious. You talk about a conflict of interest. AARP got paid a lot of money to be an endorser for Genworth for these people to buy these policies. Now these policies are unbelievably expensive. So you're talking about people that now have health problems. Maybe they're still at home, but they're looking at maybe going into assisted care or convalescent. But their premiums, we're talking $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year, where they were paying a fraction of that 20 years ago.
Right.
And so it just is. Anyway, don't get me started because I can get off on that one.
Well, what we're talking about here is as people are living longer, what's going to be the financial impact and what's
Right.
going to be the likely scenario. So that's when we pressure test people's plans. And I want to move us on to another trend that we're seeing, which is sandwich generation. And that terminology we've seen in the media, but there are actually different sandwich generations.
Yeah.
So as we were preparing for this episode, we could reference personal situations where we've seen a young couple that's caring for their toddler, and they have older parents that come to live with them and actually help provide childcare. You've got other circumstances where you've got the high income earners in the family going out to work. They've got young or teenage age children, and now they're actually having to start to provide care for their elderly parents. You've got other sandwich generations, which we benefit from. We have grandparents locally where we live, and
but it's
they
a rarity,
actually
right?
provide some childcare assistance to our children, so their grandchildren, but they still have parents. So our children's great-grandparents, right? And they are now having to walk through, assisted living, increased medical care that's needed in the later stages of life. So so let's talk about the economic impact of these sandwich generations.
Yeah, and I think it's continually interesting as people are living longer. I think there's a great way you said that. It's not just one sandwich generation that's the stereotypical, this is what you see, which you might have seen years ago. But as people are living longer, there could be multiple generations at play here. I mean, in our personal family, we have a grandkid generation, a kid generation, a grandparent generation, and a great-grandparent generation. That is all living and cared for in different ways. So I think there's a beauty, and there's a comment in this article that said, caring for aging parents can be a drag on a household, and it can weaken that family's careers. I just thought it was such a negative view of that. Of yes, there's some economic realities we need to work through, and if someone's living through that, it feels extremely hard. But I think there's such a different view to say, hey, this is our family. Our family is a mezzanine of life stages. And to kind of use those and utilize those in a good way, like grandparents providing childcare. Like, hey, that's wonderful if that works out. You have some families where the grandparents are still working, right? They can't stop working. They have to continue. So it's very much a mixed bag. But I think as people are getting older, we're going to see more and more families that have multiple generations, and to figure out, do they live together? Do they live in similar cities? How do they support one another in ways that are useful?
And there's no one simple answer. When I look at the demographics and the trends that have occurred over the last 30, 40 years, and probably will continue to trend, less children being born, and we have less people paying into the Social Security system, but also, families don't have the same, both husband and wife typically work, and then also they don't stay local. So where the parents, where they grew up, there may be another part of the country. So how do you provide that assistance and care and people that want to? But it's not a simple one and done kind of thing. It's such a complex issue, and every household has their issues. That's where the personal planning is so critically important because we
Right.
ask the hard questions. What happens if? And, you fill in the blank. And our job is to help our clients through that what if thing, right?
Right, exactly. And when you look at the multi-generation aspect, you have to think of resources as across all generations present.
Yep.
Resources and needs, and then potential needs. And that's exactly what we do, is sometimes bring up those average costs of different, if it's childcare to healthcare delivery to what if a disability occurs? What if there's a lawsuit because somebody slipped and fell at your house?
Right.
So it's not that we have to deal with the doom and gloom, but how do we create a secure umbrella
What's the best outcome, right?
around the entire family
Yeah,
unit,
right. I get it.
And the transfer of wealth from one generation to the other, and what's the most tax efficient way to do that? How will that benefit the entire family? There's so many different topics and conversations that have to come to play. But as we see people living longer, these multi-generational family units are going to, and that sandwich generation, that's going to continue. We're going to see more and more of that.
Yep.
And it might be a double sandwich, right? You might have, young families,
A double
older
sandwich.
families.
What does that mean? That's
Right,
a big.
right.
That's a big
Ooh.
deli
Is
sandwich.
that like a double stuffed Oreo?
There you
It's-
go.
Can you get your mouth over that one?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
thinking like the peanut butter and the jelly. Like there's a peanut butter
There you go.
generation, there's a jelly. Like, there's
And
multiple
now
layers.
I'm with you. Now I'm
There you
with
go. And if people are really, say we start living to 100, if that becomes a normal thing because of medical as well as lifestyle, I could see people working if they know they're going to live to 100. If that was the expectation of everybody, well, working till 60 and then having 40 years of just free money. I'm not sure how that works.
Well,
out.
again, I think
Who changed
expectations. Yeah, expectations of life. I don't want to be sitting in a chair rocking and looking at sunsets every day. I want to be productive. I want to have a vital part. And everybody I talk to wants. Health is the biggest issue, and that's the biggest common denominator. Can you do things because you're healthy? There's only so many rounds of golf you can play. There's only so many honeydews that can get accomplished. Family's important, but social networks are important. So the blue zone, which you referred to earlier, like, for example, these spots, these areas across the globe, a lot of it is social interaction. They have a body of people that they interface with on a continual basis, and that is a big part of their longevity.
Yep. Yep,
It's a big
absolutely.
deal.
Community is important. So,
It is.
the answer to, is there a limit to how long we can live? Of course there is. We are not made to live forever, but for those years that we do have living, right, we want to look at how can we be the healthiest version of ourselves, and how does this impact our whole family, and to have a financial plan and a structure in place for that. So if one of our listeners is wondering, questioning, wanting to ask some hard questions and figure out a financial plan for their life, come talk to us. We love having those conversations and building in the plan for you.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.